Tattoos. Alright. So, first thing is first, as we all know, this is the last Flamingo Friday of the quarter. And it could be the last, and we have like 9 more left. Yeah, 9 or 10 more left.
Like in the.
Here. And not only that, this is it. Flamingo Friday's done. It's over. This is the last year it's gonna be done. Actually, one more Flamingo Friday. Done. Well, it's not all me. This comes from above. This comes from the very top.
You can't live without us.
No more Flamingo Friday, so you guys better enjoy this. By the way, what day is it today? We need a drum roll, please. Drum roll. Yes. By the way, the rat has a new friend, the Lorax. Someone made a Lorax, and have you noticed the growing?
You should just move it.
Yeah, we got little flamingos. There's a duck. I don't know that. That's my 5th period class. They are special topics. Really doing a good job. I told you that WPA did a number of artwork. This is some of my favorite WPA works of art. They did these posters, amazing posters in the late 1930s for the national parks. I bet a lot of you have seen these. And people copy them now all the time. They're fantastic. I love these. And the design is really cool. These are, of course, really great ones. Every national park has these. They're wonderful. Yeah, I like that style of art from the late 1930s. You can see a little bit here, that booklet here, in the Art Deco style, even on our own Helena Middle School. All these dots are WPA construction programs. That's not even roads. There's also thousands of miles of roads. This is going to build the infrastructure that we are still using today. Even though a lot of it is crumbling, it's old, but what an amazing benefit for society and our economic system. Think about having all this infrastructure now. Business now can get goods to market. Customers can come places better. It would expand and connect the entire country. This will build what we are today. And this idea that business did it on their own is ridiculous. The WPA did it. 1/8 of all WPA money went to New York City alone. It's a WPA town. And it did not discriminate based upon race. This was an amazing program. And it would go on to about 1942. The middle of World War II. So what are the results of the WPA, the Second New Deal? Well, you can see right here. Government spending went up, but industrial production by 36 reached its peak. It reached its new peak. It passed what it was during the 20s boom. And here's the biggie. Unemployment halved. It shrunk. It was still too high. But the trend lines going into the election of 1936 were that unemployment was going down and people are getting back to work. There was a general feeling amongst many working people that the country was getting better. And even though it's still too high, it just felt better. And Roosevelt was riding a wave of this. Second New Deal, as important as the first New Deal was, the Second New Deal would change the United States to this very day. And of course, be absolutely despised by a group of people in the United States. But the most important thing, the Second New Deal would be an entire remaking of America called the Great Depression, a Great Compression. And the Great Compression is the compression of the gap between the rich and the poor. For the first time in American history, and the only time, a sustained shrinking of the gap between the rich and the poor. And for the first time, the middle class grew exponentially, meaning more people than ever before could afford some of the trappings of an upper class life. They still had to work, but they could afford it. And that became known as just this middle class lifestyle. And in many ways, this is going to save capitalism. Because who knows what would have come out of that? Because there were options, fascism and communism. And this would end very suddenly in the 80s conservative revival. And so that graph there shows the wealth of the top 1%. And look at they call it the long gilded age, with 20, how high the wealth was. Great Compression. This is the wealth of the top 1%. Look what happened. It's pretty startling here in 1980. And this goes to about 2004, but it's now, the Great Divergence it's accelerating at a rate never seen before. Wealth is being focused to the top at a rate that's kind of mind-boggling. Now, just 3 individuals, not families, 3 individuals have more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. You know who they are? Bezos. Musk, Bezos, and Zuckerberg. The wealth is just, and their wealth is almost double in the last few years. It is just focusing to the top at a rate unheard of. But remember, that's cultural economics. And so, this idea that regular people can afford things like a vacation, maybe a summer cabin, maybe a boat, little things like that, just little luxuries that were unheard of. Regular working people, people working in factories, people working, making cars to afford. And there's something else. With this growing here, there was an expectation in the United States that the next generation, meaning their kids, will have a better life than they did. And that was the expectation of this period of 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. That is what I wanted. I was born. That was my goal. I was just expecting my life, a higher standard of living, higher lifestyle, better lifestyle. That was just accepted. So you have to understand something. Old people like me, or people born a little bit later, but were educated by people who grew up in that, they have a totally different attitude. They have a different vision of history, of the future than you do. Because you're not growing up in that world. You're growing up in this world, where more and more money is funneled to a few people, which is the goal of economic policy. You might think that's a good or bad thing. That's not even the point. Your attitude to the future will be significantly different than that your parents will or your grandparents. And there'll be a lot of misunderstanding there. Because today, the expectation is that kids will not have this high standard. In fact, it's substantially worse. Looks like. 2 things about them. That's why it's important to understand that you come from different worlds. I come from a different world. And people talk about today. People always focus on like, well, today, like people old like me, things were so much different. They talk about things like cell phones or computers. What? To me, that's kind of wrong. It's different. It's my generation is huge. Your generation is huge. Get that point? That's the big change. That's what people fail to understand a lot. I think part of the reason there seems to be this general unease, especially among people your age. If you notice, reading about people your age and a little bit older, people below 40, aka young kids like old folk like me. Number 2, this is just as important. Why did this happen? Sun came up and all of a sudden the gap between the rich and the poor got bigger. The sun came up and the gap between the rich and poor got smaller. Well, there was a president who came in, but what changed? Yeah. The US government started getting a lot more. Yeah, but it was, and not what you're right. And what that was, this was policy. This was government policy to have a growing middle class. And this was government policy to have a shrinking middle class and more level income. That's policy. That was a decision made by government. And that's politics. And if you don't like politics, that means that you're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine with this, or you're perfectly fine with this. If you don't like politics, that means you're letting others, or you vote on things like what kind of bathrooms. And you're missing what matters. That's what matters. There's my economic talk for today, but you notice how things relate. I don't know, we all have busy lives, and it's easy to get focused on things that, simple. That's a little more complex. So, one more thing, I want to show you this graph. And this is actually kind of interesting. Let's just go this one. This actually goes to 2004, but it's so stark, it's just easy to see. The green is the percentage of increases by quintile. So the bottom 20%, the next 20%, get the point on that? This is during the Great Depression. The bottom 20%, their wealth actually grew faster than any other group. That's never happened in history for a sustained period. Now, everyone grew in wealth, that's great. Now look after 1980. That's how much wealth? Bottom. And where did most of the wealth go? To the top. Now, that's economic policy. You say that's a good thing because they know how to deal with money, and that will also encourage people to work harder. Or you can say it's a bad thing because it leads to massive inequalities. So let's jump to the election of 1936. In the election of 1936, you can imagine Roosevelt riding a high with a better economy, but Republicans sincerely believe that they are going to win. They believe nobody liked the New Deal. They believe that the New Deal was a failure. In fact, Herbert Hoover tried to get the nomination again, but conservatives had to bite their tongue when they elected a moderate Republican, the governor of Kansas, Alf Landon. Landon accepted some of the New Deal, but he did something that was kind of clever, they thought. Landon said, we like elements of the New Deal, but we can do it better than Roosevelt. We'll do it better. And this is a cartoon of the Republicans stealing the Democratic program. Turns out that wasn't a good idea, but that's what they thought. And conservatives had to bite their tongue. They didn't like it, but they went with Landon, who was more moderate. The Democrats, of course, went with FDR, but Republicans sincerely believed they were going to win. Literary Digest was the most popular magazine in America. And they did a poll of their readers. And their readers said that Landon would win over 60% of the popular vote. It's going to be a landslide. And they exactly predicted the last two elections. Political polling was brand new at this time. So pretty imprecise. Only people who were subscribers to the magazine. Have you heard of magazines? And there used to be these things you would buy. They've gone to the way of newspapers, which is very sad, but we don't have much news anymore. There's a lot of information, there's just not many reporters. So they totally underestimated Roosevelt's popularity. We call it the Roosevelt Coalition. And it was labor unions, small farmers. I put down farmers, small farmers. The working class, but also the little businesses that were forming. They were Roosevelt's coalition. Immigrants and African Americans. African Americans outside of the South that could vote, they voted for the Democrats because of the WPA. Even though it was Southern Democrats that were the party of Jim Crow, they started voting Democrats because of FDR. And this is the vast majority of the population. FDR, though, was really worried. And a couple days before the election, Richard Moreland, one of his main advisors, told him, basically, gave him his prediction. And Moreland said, you're going to win Vermont, or I'm sorry, Landon will win Vermont, Landon will win Maine, and you'll win every other state. And Roosevelt's like, no way. It's going to be tight. It's going to be tight. He was hoping for over 50% of the popular vote. It'd be an election that was totally disappeared. They got rid of it and they went to a mountain valley and lived in a hut. And that was the thing that shocked him the most. I don't even know how he did that. It's a slight victory for Roosevelt. He won 61% of the popular vote. And they were exactly right. He lost 2 states. And those were razor thin. He almost won those. The Roosevelt victory was awe-inspiring. In all the elections in American history, this is the second biggest popular vote margin in history. The biggest would be by another Democrat, Lyndon Johnson in 1964. What a victory. And you can imagine how Roosevelt is thinking, I can do anything. He had hubris beyond belief. You know, he feel pretty special after this. And look at the electoral college sweep. Only a few have been bigger than that one in history. An amazing victory. Roosevelt would sweep in, and he had plans for a brand new third New Deal to finish what he started. What's the third New Deal? Some kind of healthcare insurance. Oh, here he is right after he got elected. See his son Curtis holding him up. See the cane right there. That's Eleanor Roosevelt, his wife. Health insurance. Educate, massive education, aid for public education. There's never been any federal government aid for education, including public school tuitions. We paid for by taxpayer money, therefore free tuition. And thankfully, we don't have that. College was a lot cheaper when I was young, a lot. Not just within in real terms, coming inflation. And lastly, something about civil rights. Following his wife's lead, he wanted to do something about Jim Crow laws, to go back to Reconstruction and to Reconstruction laws of the Civil Rights Act of 1873. So he was promising that, but the problem was this, and this cartoon shows it really well. The AAA, the first one, Agricultural Adjustment Act, thrown out by the Supreme Court. The NRA thrown out. And here is a cartoon showing the Supreme Court, they show it in a horse and buggy, and all these new modern vehicles like Social Security, the Wagner Act trying to get through. Well, the Supreme Court stopped. So Roosevelt is thinking, I'm so popular, now the time is in. Before I get the third New Deal done, let's get rid of this, or let's change the Supreme Court. And this will be soon dubbed court pact. Okay, the Supreme Court has been 9 members since Reconstruction. Since Grant was president. 9 members. Now remember, Congress creates the court. The Congress creates the court system, the federal courts, the Supreme Court. They can also dictate a lot of what they decide. Congress has all this power, but they haven't touched the court system since Reconstruction. We really haven't touched it since. You know, think about it. Today, the country's 10 times bigger than what it was, and yet we still have the same number of district courts and the Supreme Court members. It's kind of shockingly inadequate for what we have for the legal decisions today. But back to this. And so the court was very economically conservative. In fact, many members of the Supreme Court voted to overturn the last attempt at child labor laws, for example, under President Wilson. And Roosevelt's in there thinking, I got to get Social Security and the Wagner Act through. So he came up with a plan, and he thought this was a moderate plan, but it was too tricky by a factor of 1,000. There were 7 members of the Supreme Court, over 7. And the thought was, okay, we'll have up to 6 apprentices to appoint up to 6 judges for every judge over 7. So there's a judge over 7, we can appoint an apprentice. So a max of 15. So he thought, I'm not trying to pack the court with only my allies. We're just getting new judges ready. Well, it was just too clever, too complex. He should have just said, we're going to move it up to 12. Probably got passed. But instead, this tricky, seemed kind of like he's up to something. He's going to put his own people on there, AKA like a dictator would, to take over the court system. So here's a cartoon of the 9 members of the Supreme Court, and here are the 6 new members, and you notice they're all FDRs. And the thought was it'll be a rubber stamp court, just like an autocratic monarch or dictator. And it's going to cause a firestorm because conservative Democrats, especially from the South, they thought they couldn't go against FDR. That FDR was too powerful. Now they saw it. And FDR's advisors told them, this firestorm is this showing the firestorm when he suggested this. You're going to lose. Gotcha. Go back. Come up with a different idea. Get your other bills passed. But instead, Roosevelt was like, they can't vote against me. I had 61% of the popular vote. Want to bet? It was a disastrous failure. Conservative Southern Democrats, those are the SDs, and all Republicans voted against it. It was his first road. Roosevelt seemed unbeatable now. All of a sudden, conservative Democrats began to jump ship. What he should have done, hindsight's a beautiful thing, but what he should have done is he should have got his health insurance plan, or got his college education plan, got those through Congress when he was popular, like he did in the first 100 days in 1933, and worry about the court later. It was a terrible tactical mistake, but that's hubris. He thought he could do anything. I don't know what kind of health insurance he would have. Got it done?
Yeah.
He might have had something like Canada, which is a national healthcare insurance. Hospitals are private, but the health insurance is from the government. A kind of quasi-private public thing like France or Germany. I don't think it would have been like what Britain has, or the Veterans Administration here has, which is a natural health insurance. The whole thing is the government. I don't know. But didn't happen. Well, ironically, the court's going to get more liberal. There's guys over 70. Roosevelt's going to quickly appoint 2 new justices. The court will give more, it will become more liberal, but it will be a massive political defeat. Unprecedented political defeat. He wasted all of that political capital, popularity after the election. But I should add 2 things. The Wagner Act and Social Security, add that, would be confirmed. The Wagner Act, they did make it through the court. So he got a little bit of what he wanted. The court was actually kind of cowed by this. But he's fallible. He can make mistakes. One thing I should add, so the courts, the Wagner Act, so it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said it was constitutional. And there's been so many court cases about the Wagner Act, you can't even imagine. And I think I mentioned this once before, but it is right now in federal court to try to overturn the Wagner Act. You get rid of workers' right to collectively bargain right now. Did I tell you this? I thought I did. I told the other classes. But it's right now in courts right now to get rid of the workers' right to the form of. There's a lawsuit by 3 corporations. The 2 biggies that you know of is Amazon and Tesla are suing to get rid of labor right now because they didn't cut wages. So that's what's happening right now. So we'll see. So back to this. And then Roosevelt made another mistake. And this one was one of just pure folly and misunderstanding the economic situation. A recession is going to happen. And if a recession happens, you don't want it named after yourself. You don't want something like this. The Partridge disaster is not something I want. Oh, yeah, very good. No. Well, remember, he thought the Depression was over. And debt goes up in a bad economic times. So he thought, hey, we can cut spending and balance budget now. It's over. We can cut spending. What do you call it when government cuts spending? What is that called? I gave you that name. Begins with an A. Austerity. He adopted austerity by cutting the WPA by almost in half. And he joined with his political enemies to get this through. Conservative Southern Democrats and most Republicans voted with him. His allies were opposed to Franklin Roosevelt. He undercut his own allies, assuming where else they're going to go. So many politicians will make this move to undercut the base of their support, thinking where else are they going to go. This is kind of like the normal operating procedure for the modern Democratic Party. Republicans are much better at going with their base supporters. Democrats go against their base supporters time after time after time. It's kind of fascinating. These are political tactics. But back to this. So what happened? Demand tanked and a recession began. Here's unemployment going down with the WPA. And this big increase in unemployment right there is when they got rid of the WPA. or half. Well, Roosevelt panicked, and then the heck with the deficit, the heck with the debt. They doubled the WPA in 38, and the economy got going again. Everyone got that. In fact, the heck with the deficit, or as I said, deficit schmeficit. Like how I did that? Like that? You can use that. Deficit schmeficit. I made that up myself. And I'm letting you use it, no copyright. So everyone got that spending. Everyone got that. They're going to start spending again. But by then, it was arguably too late. The Depression or the WPA was expanded, but he would too late fully adopt the new economic system that's being created at that time, Keynesian economics. Everyone got that? Keynesian economics. I'll explain it. Everyone write down Keynesian economics? So, but it would be the end of the New Deal. Oh, New Deal programs would go on, but that third New Deal did not happen. Any chance for a national health care insurance? Gone. And it's never happened. Education aid, especially free college tuition? Absolutely not. And civil rights, it's going to take another couple decades, over 2 decades, to go back just simply to where it was at the end of Reconstruction. The last 2 big laws of the New Deal would be the second AAA. To save small farmers, they would get loans and store surplus when prices are low, and then sell the surplus when prices are high. Grain, any kind of grain can store indefinitely. As long as it's kept at a constant temperature, wheat can last for decades. Right now, there's a very good chance if you buy anything made out of grain, so you buy bread, that wheat could be 40, 50 years old, and it's perfectly fine. As long as the temperature remains stable. It's kind of a remarkable thing. Obviously, not everything is. Next, the Fair Labor Standards Act. That set up a minimum wage. The idea was the minimum wage would be high enough to bump other wages up. The national minimum wage hasn't gone up in 30 years. And so the minimum wage now is $7.25, the national minimum wage. It's not enough to bump any wages up. It's not high enough now to make any difference, especially for anybody, for waitresses or waiters. In 43 states, their minimum wage is $2.37 an hour for waiters and waitresses. Montana is an exception. We used to be a very pro-worker state. So wait staff is now paid minimum wage. But if you go out to New York City, it's $2.37 an hour. Because they're going to get tips. So tough job. It's already a tough job at minimum wage. If anybody done any, or you just might have to be watching somebody who waits tables. That's a hard job. Just imagine $2.37. Next, 40-hour work week. How do they enforce a 40-hour work week? If you work over 40 hours, what do you get? Overtime. And same deal. Some jobs are qualified for overtime, some aren't. And businesses always try to make more and more jobs like supervisorial, so they don't get that overtime. My job is not overtime. I'm a salaried employee. I do not get overtime. Neither do administrators. We're salaried. Some jobs are, some jobs aren't. But that raises wages. And lastly, child labor laws. And all got through constitutional scrutiny. Even though child labor laws are coming. Florida's going to get rid of child labor. It's already out doing it. Florida's going to do it because most of the farm workers are immigrants. Immigrants are terrified up to the country. Everyone's afraid from the US now. And so they're going to replace it with acorns. And I think that's awesome. They're going to get rid of child labor laws to replace immigrant workers. It will happen in other places. I don't know where it'll go by the court, but yeah, that's happening right now.
Let's say if I can say that, it's just saying that if this,
Wait, say it again.
just saying that a was going to be pretty good, that was awesome. We know that I don't like the previous thing, but.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I filmed me saying that too. No, I'm actually opposed to fourth graders in the factories or in the sweatshops and all. But that's economics. So, what is Keynesian economics? Speaking of that, John Maynard Keynes was a British economist. He even wrote FDR in 1937 saying, don't cut spending. And his big issue was debt deflation. He's an economist that really got laid out what I told you about debt deflation. Debt deflation is everyone trying to pay back their debt, tanks demand. No one spends money because they're trying to get their debt down. Who's the only thing? What's the only entity that can make up for the spending? The government. The government through deficit spending can make up the difference, can do the demand. So if no one's spending money, there's just money sitting there. If the government takes it and spends it, it raises demand. And the heck with the deficit, we'll get the deficit down when times are good. This is not a new thing. And this is the way deficits work. That's John Maynard Keynes right there. There are so many pictures of John Maynard Keynes reading a book. He first proposed this in 30 and 31. Only two countries did it right away. The US only partially did. What two countries? The first one is so obvious, you all know it. It's Sweden, right? It'd be obvious, right? And Sweden was out of the depression in a year. Does anybody know the other country? These are workers building a highway system that was part of this Keynesian economics they would adopt. Nazi Germany, yes. That's not something Keynes really wanted to talk about. But Nazi Germany did deficit spending and got their 30% unemployment down to virtually no unemployment in a year and a half. How did they do it? They borrowed money and built dams. Immense buildings that are all really ugly. But all of these buildings. And of course, this is Hitler doing what a lot of new workers or a lot of leaders do. I'm a worker like you, doing one shovel full of dirt. What's the highway system that they would build? The Autobahn, which the interstate highway system would copy 20 years later. This amazing road network in Germany, and they put workers back to work. Unemployment tanked out of the depression. And they started, airplane industry, you name it. And then in 1935, munitions. But that's another story. And they got out of the depression. Keynes warned Roosevelt. Roosevelt still ignored it, but then went full out spending. So let's review. We've already had trickle-down economics. So remember, wealthy get money. Remember that through government aid. So this is review. Remember that's creates supply, right? This is review. Employment goes up, and that creates demand. Supply side economics, supply creates demand. Does everyone got that? That's trickle-down economics. And funnel money to this tiny group of people because they know how to produce and now create demand. That was 30s economics. That is the economic system of the United States and Montana today. Funnel money as fast as possible to the wealthy because they know how to do things. Now, what's Keynesian economics? Keynesian. Now this one will be bottom up. So give yourself some room. Bottom up. And what is it? Funnel money into the working class through government aid. We'll get to the government aid in just a second. That will get them money. What will they do with that money? If people don't have money, all of a sudden they get money. What's the first thing they do with that money? Right away. I mean, think about it. If you have a family, you didn't have money to spend on just holding for your family, shelter. Also, you get money, you're gonna spend that right away for what you haven't had. Right away. Poor people, working people, give them money, they spend it right away. And that is one of the issues with trickle-down economics. If you give very wealthy people more money, they don't necessarily spend it because they don't necessarily need anything. There's a big difference. And that creates demand. Now they're going to go to the store. What's going to happen? Companies will meet that demand. Production will go up. I don't know why I didn't write this down, but I also write down supply. More supply. Well, also the companies are going to produce more. Businesses begin to produce more. They need workers. Employment goes up. So you notice it's almost opposite, isn't it? And if there's more workers, that puts money in whose hands? If there's more workers with jobs, Who gets the money? It goes back to the working class and higher wages. And what do? Buy more stuff, more supply, more employment. And this is the engine. So the idea is eventually you won't need as much as this. And so here's Keynes holding a book. Mr. Keynes had a plan. But here is one, my favorite picture of Keynes holding a book. Don't you love that one? Doesn't it look like he's about ready to go off to become his second job as a serial killer? That's what I love that picture. He looks evil right there. But John Maynard Keynes. And what do we call this? Liberal or demand side economics? Or Keynesian? Keynesian economics. All of Western Europe, Japan, Australia, and the United States would adopt Keynesian economics after World War II. And that would lead to the Great Depression. All over the world. Western Europe is still very Keynesian. Australia is Keynesian. Japan's Keynesian. Canada's Keynesian. England is not really in the US, of course. So somebody who's conservative economically, let's say Germany, would be in the US very liberal. And somebody who is part of the Labor Party in Germany, called the Social Democrats, very economically right. United States, economically, we are a conservative country. So demand great supply. And this job help consumers, help working people. So obviously that's not what we are today. Money's funding to the top. Then higher wages. Now this might lead to inflation, we'll get to this. And a couple more things. What did he want? A growing middle class. And this goes back to the populists. The populists want a growing middle class. The progressives wanted this, and it would happen under Roosevelt's New Deal. So this is where people start saying we're a middle class country, a growing middle class. In fact, so many people to this day will claim to be middle class, even though most people are working class now. And what is the government aid? Well, this should be pretty basic because it's almost the exact opposite of trickle down. Get wages up. How do you do it? Well, on the biggie, a progressive tax. So let's get this down. Let's go. A progressive income tax. We've talked about this already with the wealth tax. Pro-union, like the Wagner Act. Government regulation. So the two biggies, one would be financial regulations to avoid bubbles, like the Glass-Steagall, and another one, of course, antitrust. Antitrust regulation, anti-monopoly laws, enforcement allows for more small business, allows for kind of a spreading of wealth amongst many and raises wages. And remember that safety net. They want unemployment insurance. They want aid for the poor. Remember, FARA was one of those created during the New Deal. Another one created during the New Deal would be called food stamps. Today we call this SNAP. We have very little aid, direct aid for working people in the United States. Almost none. But food stamps or SNAP was one of the few things. So for working poor, they have a chance to get a little supplement. It's an average of about $5 to $6 a day. But a supplement towards food. It used to be called food stamps because you literally have a booklet. You rip them off. Today it's an EBT card, debit card like thing. And it provides a little bit of extra. Not very much, but a little bit for food. And once again, we have to relate things to today. Budget that was just passed by the House of Representatives, but we're going to pay all of it. In fact, what are they doing to food stamps and everything? Cut it by about a third to 40%. So it'll go down to about $2 or $3 a day. A little bit, but this was conservative economics. We talked about why they do that already. Social Security, you're gutting the Social Security Administration now, so they're opposed to it. Public Works had the WPA. So there was a big public works program passed under President Biden called the Infrastructure Bill. Trump has cut off all spending. Why? That goes against conservative economics. And he doesn't like Biden. Health insurance. Health insurance is part of Keynesian economics, but that never happened here. We have partial health insurance for the elderly and some working poor, but that's it. We do not have national health insurance. That's why we have the most complex health system imaginable. If anybody knows anything about the way hospitals have to do billing, it is the most complex Rube Goldberg awful thing ever invented. And we also spend more than twice of any other country. And education, but we don't have that. We only have a little bit of government aid for education, which is being cut right now. And then we have some help for college in form of guaranteed student loans, which are pretty iffy because it's still a debt. You gotta pay when you get out of college, and some grants, but that too is being cut. So we don't have that. So, but that's Keynesian economics. So if you go to places with a lot of Keynesian economics, they have all of these things. It's really fascinating because I have many relatives in Germany. Going to Germany and seeing the way it is there compared to here. Just kind of amazing. And talking to people going to go to college there, and they just don't even comprehend this idea that we all just seem to grow up with here of trying to come up with thousands of dollars to go to college. But the other one they don't understand is 2/3 of all bankruptcies in the United States are because of healthcare. There's no such thing as bankruptcy because of healthcare. They just can't even wrap their mind around it. So it's just an interesting difference. Challenges. What are some of the problems with this? First off, there's going to be inflation if you're trying to increase demand. But the Federal Reserve can raise interest rates or you can raise taxes, and that will stifle demand. So there is a built-in system, but nobody wants to raise taxes. In good times is when you should raise taxes. Speaking of that, debt will go up if you have deficit spending. But in good times, spending will drop because there won't be as many unemployed, and you can raise taxes during a boom. But nobody wants to raise taxes. Montana is doing quite well as a state at this moment, but Montana is actually cutting taxes. Supply side regressive cuts. Why? They, I guess, assume that the boom will continue. Next, there'll be more power in the government because there's more government programs. But one of the elements of Keynesian economics is if you're going to help the working class, you want more democratic power in their hands. So like someone who really believes in Keynesian economics, there's a very good chance they want voting rights for blacks in America were deprived those because of like Jim Crow laws. But conservatives hate Keynes. And by the late 1970s, because of inflation, the Keynesian world seemed to be breaking down and it would go away. That also, if you believe in social Darwinism, you do not like aid to the poor because they are undeserving. They're poor for a reason. So welfare is government aid and they're opposed. And social Darwinism is the dominant philosophy in the world today. You just, if you want to hear social Darwinism, just listen to Elon Musk for about 10 minutes. It's just so ingrained with that philosophy. And you can agree or disagree. That's the definition of modern social Darwinism. He calls it paternalism. Paternalistic. And natalism. Intelligent people should have power and they should breed. Right, superior people. Called natalism. So, what's the legacy? Last thing for today. The government's there to help people. We now expect that. There's a have you ever been natalist? Natalism is country. Why do you think Elon Musk has all these children? One thing about being a billionaire, no one is around you to ever question you, so I think you get a little odd. But again, though, part of that also leads to the determination to get that money. You know, that's it's an interesting thing. I never left high school, so I don't even know if that's why. Someday I'm going to graduate. Someday. So, we're also a broker state. So, an honest broker between capital, the employers, and workers, labor. That would be for about 30 years. The government will try to be in the middle. So even Republican or Democratic presidents during the Great Depression had to respect labor. And then, of course, the Great Depression was the big. But not only that, that new American dream of a middle-class lifestyle. It's not just the new middle class, the new American dream of the 50s, which is still around today. And think about what's the most important thing to show you've made it is really to own a home, which is now very difficult to do. Own a home. To get a car was another one of the 50s. And the other big one of the 50s, to get a television set and a dryer. Washer dryer, especially a dryer. That was a biggie. The things we kind of take for granted now, wow, what a big deal. But that new middle class. But here's the biggie also, that your kids can do better. Simple word where your kids can do better. Your parents want you to do better. I see something like, man, no, they really do. Also financial stability and that Democratic coalition of Roosevelt would last for 70. There would not be a Republican controlled House of Representatives in 1932. Only one member, one time the House of Representatives was controlled by Republicans from 1932 to 1990. One time. And the Senate only twice. Then the Democrats would do a certificate of firewood squad and get rid of themselves. But that's another story. The politics of the 80s and 90s are really fascinating. And that's when we quit. Does everyone have their assignment for spring break? Once again, it would be easier for me if we didn't have to do it. I promise I'll make up to you with nothing but fitness and strength buildings. Would you rather have just pure fitness or rather dig a trench? Trench. Okay, trenches. Should I just say, you guys get ready for the next one, you're almost start building trenches now. All right, we're doing it. Everyone bring a shovel Monday. And we'll do it. I want a collapsible, camp shovel. Like we're in combat, we have to shovel, right? You're with me, right? Today was the last day of the grade. I had to do the redos on the DBQ. The grades, I'll try to get them out together. I'll get them typed in as soon as I can. I am hungry. No one cares. You caring. By the way, I feel bad for all of you not to see me for a week. Sorry, I see myself almost every day. That's pretty cool.